Well, might as well start this one off with a bang. LongLegs did it better. Hello everybody, it's me Scoop, and damn if I don't have a lot to say about Weapons. As you've probably already heard, this is the story everybody is sharing when Zack Cregger's script went up for auction to different production studios. Jordan Peele with Monkey Paw Productions alongside Universal, they made a bid on this movie, and they lost. And Jordan Peele was not happy about it. He fired his agent, his whole gosh darn team, he cleaned house. And so instead the film went to New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers with a $38 million budget, which included Zack Cregger getting paid $10 million to be writer, director, and producer, and pending test screenings, he even got final cut of the film. So he was probably pretty pumped about it. Now the part that actually gets skipped over a lot is that this bidding war lasted like 3 hours. Like it was over really quick, which that's just a cool little fun fact for you guys. But what's even more interesting to me is that the core trio of actors here, Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, and Benedict Wong, were all actually recast for this film. There was initially an entirely different trio, but the film got delayed, and so they all had to step out. And you will never guess who was originally gonna play Josh Brolin's part as Archie, the father of one of the missing children. That's right, Pedro Pascal. We need to lock this motherfucker's agent up. He is too powerful. There's too much Pedro Pascal out there. So the first positive thing I will say about Weapons is that, yeah, the performances are pretty great. Genuinely, I couldn't imagine the original actors that they had in any of these three roles because the trio that we ended up with, they all did a great job, as did everybody else in the film. Even the children, like a lot of the kids were doing great work here, and it is very difficult to work with child actors, especially ones so young. We have Julia Garner starring as Justine Grandy, the third grade teacher whose students all go missing. We have Josh Brolin as, like I said, Archie, the father of one of the missing children, and Benedict Wong as the school principal. I've been following Julia Garner since her role in Inventing Anna. I thought she was pretty incredible there. That show as a whole was really solid, except for the finale. They really didn't stick the landing, but that's a different story. It is really cool to see an actress like this get to have her name plastered across the big screens for both Fantastic Four and Weapons back to back. Good for her, that's gotta feel awesome. Josh Brolin is of course always a welcome presence. He's doing a great job here, specifically his very masculine energy. It works really well for this like disgruntled father hunting down his son. He nails that aspect of it, but he also gets this sort of like franticness that he has to he's dealing with horror movie shenanigans and it gets a little frantic, and he plays that very well too. And there are of course a few moments where his emotional walls come down and man does he shed some tears, and once again, golly, he's nailing the performance. I really loved him in this movie. And of course, Benedict Wong is just always a pleasure no matter what he's doing. I genuinely could not imagine Pedro Pascal replacing Josh Brolin here, whatsoever. Don't know how that happened. So the core mystery behind Weapons, as we all know, is discovering what happened to Miss Gandy's class. What we do know is 17 out of the 18 students are missing because at 2:17 in the morning, they got out of their beds, ran out of their houses and into the darkness, never to be seen again. And I just feel so incredibly mixed on Weapons because I did really enjoy it, but also I don't really have anything positive to say about it. Like I said, performances are really great, but that's about as many compliments as I can give it. I would say my biggest issue with the film is that everything just feels out of place. Another word I would say is maybe coincidental. There are a lot of comparisons online between LongLegs and Weapons, and on the surface, I do totally understand that. You have the FBI investigating these tragedies that are tearing families apart, the suburban terror of it all, you know? And it all leads back to this supernatural core figure behind the whole thing. And say what you will about LongLegs, I do understand why a lot of people didn't like it. I personally thought it was pretty incredible. The one thing I will say about it, though, is that Nicolas Cage did nearly derail the entire film. He was given that kooky performance with, improv and stuff. I don't know what was going on there. I don't know why Osgood Perkins didn't at least, attempt to rein him in. It genuinely, it could have derailed the whole film. But everything else besides that, it was so tonally focused and oppressive. It felt like this dark descent beginning with an FBI serial killer investigation, luring you down into the depths of hell, where by the time the credits roll, you could feel Satan's energy permeating the screen, dude. That movie has never once failed to leave me feeling completely unnerved. So with a really tightly written and compelling mystery and incredible tone being LongLegs' two strong suits, it's interesting to note that I would say these two elements are the weakest parts of Weapons. The way the mystery in Weapons is trickled out over its 2-hour runtime is genuinely, it's a little baffling that this is the structure they ended up with, and that ignited a bidding war across Hollywood. But before we go any further, much like LongLegs and weapons, this video too will be a bit of a descent into spoiler territory. So we're going to start off light minor spoilers, but I'm going to give you a nice jumping off point right here. If you're interested in seeing weapons, despite this review not being positive, like pretty much at all from here on out, I will say, if you find it interesting, you might as well go see it. Decide for yourself if you like it, because clearly critics and audiences are liking it, and I'm kind of in the minority of having a lot of issues with it, so I would recommend it. At the very least, I wasn't bored or like annoyed or anything during the runtime. Like, I was very engaged with the film. So go with some friends, go see it whenever you can. It doesn't have to be right this second, but yeah, maybe try to stay away from spoilers if you are very interested in going to see it. And yeah, form your own opinion, and when you do, come back here, finish this video, and we'll discuss it in the comments down below. Just temper your expectations a little bit. I feel like this is just horribly overhyped. But back to the main review. So, anybody who's seen Weapons knows that the film is structured around these chapters based on specific characters. And I understand why they went with this structure. Because if you break down this movie linearly in a timeline fashion, it doesn't make any fucking sense. But before we talk about that, what's important is that these chapters and the way they kind of dole out answers to the mystery as the film goes on, I just didn't love this. It felt like they were trying to hide something from you, and not in a, well, we gotta, leave the mystery to the end and we're slowly gonna unravel it type of way. In a, there's just not that much to tell kind of way, where they have to structure the film in such a manner so they can actually have a full runtime without, the first piece of evidence leading to the finale, which is basically what happens if you really break it down. So every chapter here ends up leading us back to the same house, this spooky house where everything seems to be centered. And the issue is, there's really only two parts of the answer to this mystery. There is the where they went to and how they got there. And unfortunately, we understand that they went to this spooky house central location pretty much right off the rip, because it's the only area of interest introduced throughout the entire film. There's no red herrings, other possible locations, nothing. It all centers on this house. So what ends up happening is that the audience spends about 75% of the runtime waiting for the mystery to make the jump from where to how, because there's really nothing in between the two. We know it's the house, we just don't quite understand how they got there, and yet nothing in between these two reveals really leads us there. It kind of just feels like they're coming up with random bullshit to make the story last longer. Because this house is just so immediately suspicious, and every piece of detail like that we get about it builds to this mystery and this suspiciousness, sure, but it gets to the point of diminishing returns when each chapter just adds a little piece to it. I wonder why the windows are blocked. That's weird. I wonder why the parents are stuck in like a hypnosis. They're completely unfazed, stuck on the couch. That's a little bit weird. Why does the door just open into darkness? That is admittedly pretty fucking spooky and creepy and well done, but at a certain point, I just kind of want to know what's going on in the house, and I don't need to see so much more of, ooh, spooky, weird house. And because this house is the only location that's even offered up as a possible place the children could be hiding, when the crackhead finally enters the basement and we see all the children standing there, I was left completely unfazed, and it really felt like most of the theater was too. This moment genuinely should have been one of the craziest reveals in like at least recent memory of horror movies, based on the way this movie was marketed and the way it opens and sets everything up. Where the children are hiding should have been massive, and yet it kind of just happens and you're like, yeah, I mean, of course they're in there. There's literally nowhere else they could possibly be. And what pisses me off the most about the whole mystery element of this film is that there's like a 1-minute scene talking about how the FBI looked into the suspicious family and checked their house. And that's just supposed to be this ultimate deflector shield of like plot holes and criticisms of the FBI getting involved and the mystery just not making any goddamn sense, when it doesn't do that. It doesn't block all the criticisms. You can poke a bajillion holes in this shield. It is useless. So Josh Brolin investigates where his son ran to, and he only looks into one other child where they ran to, and he finds out where the paths intersect. He doesn't know the exact point of interest, but he narrows it down. And guess what? That house is in there. Okay. The only kid in class who didn't go missing, well, he lives in that house. Suspicious. Oh, the dad in that house can't speak, and the mom left them, and the aunt is this kooky weirdo who dresses and talks like an insane person. Man, that's a little bit suspicious. But don't worry, the FBI checked the house and they tore the whole thing apart and they didn't find anything, so that family's in the clear. What? Once again, I mean, I think the Josh Brolin piece of evidence is the worst part here, because if the FBI spent 5 seconds and saw, all of these kids were running around this central area where the one kid who didn't go missing is at, and he has this weird, suspicious aunt. Man, maybe we should surveil their house for more than like an hour. Maybe we'll find something. And if they did that, they would have found something, because the minute the FBI leaves, the house boards their windows back up and goes back to being weird and creepy and suspicious. And once again, we are dealing with 17 missing children. You're telling me the FBI couldn't just give it like 2 days? They couldn't monitor this house for 2 days, send just like 2 guys to sit in a car and look for weird shit going on. The worst part is, the kooky, weird, suspicious aunt, who is in fact behind all of this, is like one of the worst puppet masters in horror movie history. So my other big issue is that besides the fact like the mystery is a mess, the mystery being a mess is really just a symptom of the story genuinely being like pure nonsense. Like there's a bajillion holes you can poke in this thing if you look for more than 5 seconds. So going back to LongLegs as my comparison, once again, like say what you will, if you didn't like it, fair enough. But like I said, the mystery in that movie is so tightly wound. By the time the credits roll, we understand everything. Why were we following Lee Harker specifically? What is her connection to LongLegs? Why does the film and her character have this weird dream-like quality about it where her backstory seems to be shrouded in mystery? It all makes sense. Sure, Lee was technically just a random victim when LongLegs first came into her and her mother's life, but by the time the story picks up like 25, 30 years later, we're so far past that everything really does revolve around Lee and LongLegs and the way that they kind of interact with each other throughout the story. It's very cleanly put together. Weapons doesn't have anything like that. Characters and weapons will just haphazardly stumble in and out of the story and be very tangentially related to one another, and so because the movie is told in chapters with focusing on specific characters one at a time, you don't really notice this, but once again, when you actually stop and you think about it, and you put the timeline of events in order, it really doesn't make any sense. For example, the random crackhead kid who like stumbles into the house's basement and finds the missing children. Like I said, this should have been one of the most important scenes of like horror movie history, one of the craziest reveals ever, but instead this is a character who has nothing to do with anything finding the children. The only reason he's in the movie at all is because the cop, Paul, who is the ex-boyfriend of Miss Gandy, whooped this guy, hit him with a haymaker in the face, and he's just a poor crackhead looking for money, so he robs this house because the house looks abandoned. And the craziest part is, he finds the kids and doesn't even know what to do with the information. He's like, I'm just gonna get out of this house, I don't know. And then he only gets involved with the story again because he sees, oh, there's a $50,000 reward. Like, it feels like, what are we doing here? Like, what does this guy have to do with anything? Why is he so suddenly important to the plot when, like, he really shouldn't be? He's just kind of a dude. I think my complaints with this character specifically could be nitpicky. Like, if this doesn't bother you, that's totally fair. I see why, but I don't know. It bugs me a lot, but don't worry. I have way more criticisms that are way more valid than just this guy. And I think the moment where the crackhead kid goes to the police station, but Paul, the cop, chases him away, this is a great example of what bothers me about the movie, because this scene is like the illusion of being really smart. The first time we see this part, it's from Paul's perspective, and we imagine he's chasing the kid away because the kid is gonna rat on Paul for, whooping him in the face. But then when we play the scene back from the kid's perspective, we see he was actually going to report the missing children, and Paul has now chased him away. And in the moment, I was like, oh, that's so cool, because we saw it from one perspective, but now we're seeing it from the other. Then when you take a step back, it kind of just feels like, what are we doing here? Like, I want to focus on Josh Brolin, I want to focus on the other parents, I want to focus on Miss Gandy's character. Like, why are we focusing on these people? I don't care about them. So, like I've said, the story when it's told in this character chapter order, it feels a lot smarter than it is. When you play it back in chronological order, it's a mess. So to prove my point, we're gonna do that. Let's run it back from the top. So 3rd grader Alex has his spooky Aunt Gladys move in with him and his parents because she's sick. And using an unexplained type of witchcraft involving a weird stick thing and a personal item, she hypnotizes Alex's parents and siphons off of their health or something to heal herself. I don't know, it's not really explained all that well. The longer someone stays hypnotized, the more sickly they look, but I'd imagine that's less of an effect of Gladys siphoning their health and more about the fact that they can't move or fucking feed themselves or get any sunlight, any vitamin D in their skins or nothing. I don't know, it's just not very well explained and I don't like that. But anyway, Gladys tells Alex that if he mentions her to anybody, she'll make his parents kill each other. She then tells him to steal a personal item from every kid in class. So, during gym period the next day, Alex sneaks off to go grab each kid's name tag, but gets caught by his teacher, Justine Gandy, who never brings this event up ever again. You're telling me your entire classroom goes missing except for one kid, and like the day before, you caught that kid stealing everybody's name tag during playtime, and you don't find that at all suspicious to report that to the FBI? Anyway, at 2:17 a.m. that night, Alex watches Gladys summon every kid from his class to their house, and he continues going to school like nothing happened because of Gladys's threats. He must feed all of the kids and his parents soup every day, which he buys in bulk from the grocery store by himself, and then carries back home on foot. And yet, once again, nobody reports this to the FBI as being at all suspicious. This one kid, a third grader, going shopping by himself only for soup and buying like 30,000 cans every day and then carrying it home by himself on foot. The FBI does come around to check Alex and Gladys's house, so they end up cleaning it up, and all the kids run off somewhere totally undisclosed. I feel like that could be part of the mystery, but anyway. So the FBI checks around, finds nothing, and they leave, and the kids run back in. Despite Gladys dressing like this and talking like a complete maniac, they just let it all slide. She even gets questioned by the FBI and explains that Alex's father has had a stroke, which is why he won't talk, because he's really in the hypnosis phase, and I guess they hide Alex's mother. I don't really know where she's at. I think they said she left, and the FBI doesn't corroborate the story with anybody else in town who actually would have known Alex's parents and could have said, I never heard about Alex's dad having a stroke. I just talked to him like 2 days ago. Wait a minute, where's Alex's mother? She was supposed to be at the PTA meeting last night and she didn't show up. You know, stuff like that. There's nothing, no due diligence. And everything I just recapped there is the reveal at the ending of the film. This is the answer to the grand mystery, and this sucks for so many reasons, because first of all, these events are technically at the very start of your story. So if the very start of your story is built on this ridiculously rocky foundation, everything that comes after is going to be built on top of that foundation as well. So it doesn't work properly. But then on top of that, because this only comes at the end of the movie, it's the answer to the mystery, it's the conclusion to everything we've built up to, it just feels so unsatisfying that you can sit there and poke a bajillion holes in it, because if the answer to your mystery doesn't make any sense, what are we even doing here? But as the narrator says, after all that I just described, this is where the story really starts. So 1 month later, Miss Gandy hooks up with her ex-boyfriend, a local cop named Paul, and then she decides to follow Alex home because she feels that they have a connection as the only two left from her class. She notices all the windows of his house are covered with newspaper, and that Alex's parents are stuck motionless on the couch. She then has a nightmare about Gladys. Justine then returns to the house again the next day and watches from her car, where she ends up passing out because she's guzzling liquor out of a big gulp. That's some real shit, I can't lie. And then Mrs. Alex's mom, in actually a very well done and spooky scene, comes out of the house in the middle of the night, fucking in the in the Take On Me Dark Souls pose, marches her ass over to Justine Gandy's car, and it looks like she's gonna kill her or something, but instead, she crawls into the car and cuts off a piece of Justine's hair. I can't lie, that was a great moment. I love that a lot. While Miss Gandy is looking into Alex's house, Archie, the father of one of the missing children, decides that the FBI is completely fucking useless, and he is totally correct about that, by the way. So he decides to investigate for himself. He notices his son ran in a straight line upon leaving the house, and after talking to the parents of just one other missing kid, no more than that, just one, he realizes that their child also ran in a straight line. So he pulls out a map and marks the general area where the two probably would have intersected. That night, he also has a dream about Gladys, this time being in his son's bed, after he walks into his house and sees a giant AK-47 floating in the sky above it. I don't really know where they were going with this. I assumed that weapons, based on like the marketing and the title and being about a bunch of kids who suddenly disappear from a community and leave a giant hole, it would be about, let's call it bringing weapons into a school. This giant AK-47 in the sky felt like a piece of evidence to that, but by the time we got to the end of the story, I felt like that metaphor was completely gone. On top of those storylines going on, at the exact same time, we have Paul, Miss Gandy's ex, the cop. He punches that crackhead kid in the head. The crackhead kid then breaks into Alex's house because, like I said, it looks abandoned. He finds the kids in the basement and completely ignores it until he realizes there's a $50,000 cash reward for finding them. But like we talked about, when he tries to give the police his info, Paul chases him off. While he's running from Paul, he sees Gladys in the woods, waving at him, and then he thinks Gladys is coming for him now, but he ends up stabbing Paul in the face with a bunch of like heroin needles or something really nasty like that. And then after this, the two are like, oh, let's go investigate Alex's house because the crackhead kid says that that's where the children are hiding. Paul goes in first, he gets hypnotized, he's in there for hours, and then under the cover of nightfall, he marches back outside and drags the crackhead kid back into the house to be hypnotized as well. The kid is kicking and screaming bloody murder on this residential street, but apparently nobody hears it. After witnessing weird stuff at Alex's house, Miss Gandy calls the school principal Marcus to report what she saw, so Marcus calls in Alex's parents for a well check. Gladys, of course, shows up instead, acts absurdly suspicious, is not able to answer where Alex's real parents are, despite the fact that she's already been questioned by the FBI and passed their interview to the point where she's no longer a suspect. But no, Benedict Wong, the school principal, broke her. She couldn't handle that interrogation. And then she just absolutely starts losing her mind when he mentions if he doesn't speak to Alex's actual parents, he's gonna have to get CPS involved. Completely not suspicious behavior from the villain of this movie. Gladys then shows up at Marcus's house, really awkwardly forces herself inside while Marcus's boyfriend ignores every red flag known to mankind that says, get this woman out of your life and your goddamn house. And she ends up hypnotizing or possessing, whatever you want to call it. Marcus gets him to kill his boyfriend, and then Marcus gets sent like a rage homing missile beacon, whatever you want to call it, towards Miss Gandy. Why are they called Miss Gandy and Gladys, both G names, when there's like 5 characters in this whole movie? I have no idea. Miss Gandy happens to be at a gas station being confronted by Archie, who obviously believes she had something to do with the missing kids, fair enough, and the two fight off Marcus before Marcus gets run over by a car and we see him splattered on the ground in graphic detail because why not? Archie then shows Miss Gandy his map with the 2 lines of his son and the other kid intersecting, and Gandy points out that they intersect over Alex's house. So the two go there, and we enter into the final showdown, where Paul and the crackhead kid fight Miss Gandy and Archie, and meanwhile, I guess Alex just decides while the people are fighting downstairs, he's not going to listen to Gladys anymore, so he steps over this salt line, which is a new thing to Gladys's magic that is just introduced out of absolutely nowhere. If you step over the salt line, the weaponized people come for you. That's the new rule, okay? They just decided that right now for the finale. So he steps over the line, and his parents run at him. So Alex decides enough is enough. He steals one of the stick things, and he takes like one of Gladys's wig strands and wraps it around the thing, and he breaks the stick. So now the entire army of the 17 missing children bust out of the basement and chase Gladys through the entire town, breaking down the walls of several houses. I'm not joking. And this scene is played for laughs, weirdly enough. Like it's supposed to be, oh, funny, scared old lady who can't, escape children is being chased by an army of Terminator-style children. And then they graphically, brutally tear her limb from limb. Josh Brolin walks over to them, picks up his son, and walks away as the narrator explains that Alex's parents were institutionalized for the rest of their lives, and most of the children never spoke again. And the movie cuts to black. It ends like that. I literally missed that the first name of the credits is written and directed by Zack Cregger because I was so stunned. I was like, what? Wait, what? What happened at the end? Can we pause? Can we hold? So, we never get to see the community's reaction to the kids being recovered. We never get to find out what the FBI and police cover story was for all of these supernatural occurrences, which that's what I always get really invested in, is how is the public, in horror movies, how does the public find out about these unexplainable events? Does it just become a Wendigoon podcast that people look into as a weird niche internet mystery? The movie says at the very opening that the FBI and the police created a cover story for this. I'm dying to know what it was, especially because the community missing all these children is such a central part of the film and its tone and its themes and its setting. To just completely cut that from your ending is like borderline baffling to me. Gladys's witchcraft, it seems like it's tied to this tree. I would imagine that's where the sticks that she uses for her witchcraft come from, and that's how she controls people. But then, like I said, they introduced that idea of the salt lines on the ground at the end that has nothing to do with those other two concepts. And we also never find out how she's putting herself into other people's dreams, especially like Josh Brolin, who hasn't even interacted with her or the house to this point yet. Like, what? And of course, the dude who actually discovers the missing children in the first place has pretty much nothing to do with the plot, and his plotline just culminates as him and Paul being bodies that Miss Ganji and Josh Brolin have to fight at the climax of the movie, despite the fact the two of them entering the house also really has nothing to do with the resolution of the film, because for all we know, Alex could have just been fed up enough to step over the salt line anyway and then use the magic against Gladys. Like, the whole film just doesn't culminate cleanly at all. Like, all these events lead into one another technically, but only in the most literal sense of like, yes, Paul and the kid enter the house and get hypnotized. They fight the two other people, and while they're fighting the two other people, Alex does his thing upstairs. But like, story-wise, character-wise, they don't build on each other. They don't add up to anything. It's kind of just like, well, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and it just it doesn't work. Like, it's weird that the whole climax of the film really is just about Alex turning the children on Gladys, and everything else doesn't really matter. I also would like to know that if Gladys didn't get ripped apart, could she have broken the spell? Like, if she ended the spell because it lasted so long, would everybody still have been in a catatonic state? Or is it that because she was murdered, they were sort of ripped out of the spell, and that's what kind of broke their brains for the rest of their lives? You know, there's so much unanswered, left open by just cutting the film to black the second the main plot line has officially ended, with no real resolution to everything. So yeah, it's a mess, and I just don't understand why the climax ends up turning into a comedy with like Josh Brolin throwing the crackhead all over the house, knocking him out over and over and over again. It was funny, like I was laughing at it, I was laughing at Gladys running from the children, and I really did want those children to beat her ass. Like, I was invested in it, but why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that? You could have just kept a really brooding horror tone, and I would have been way more invested than being like, oh, that's funny, oh, that is really graphic, oh, it's over, what the fuck? Like, at this point, I don't think I can even give Weapons a score. Not like, oh, it's so trash, I can't even rate this. It doesn't feel like some complete clusterfuck 1 or 2 star movie, and it's definitely not some uber exceptional 4 or 5 star movie, but giving it 3 stars just doesn't feel right. That's my default. I enjoyed watching this, and I'd definitely watch it again. Like, I don't know, I didn't dislike it while I was watching it, but then when it ended, I was like really disappointed, and I don't really want to watch it again all that badly at any point, and I don't highly recommend it to anybody. I don't know how to feel. I guess conclusion is, and the crowd goes mild. Just to end this on a few positive notes, as this was one of my longer reviews, and it was a lot more negative than I usually like my reviews to be, because making a movie is really hard. I would like to do that one day, and I recognize the difficulty, so I like to focus on the positive. What have we done well here? What do I want to see more of in the future? What can we learn positively from this? But this just had a lot of negatives, and I couldn't help myself. But yeah, I would say positives, once again, performances, all incredible. And this movie was genuinely very scary. Like, it's one of the few movies I've seen in the last couple of years that passed the scare test of keeping me up at night when I go to sleep. Like, I closed my eyes and I saw Benedict Wong's possessed face coming for me. And it just, this idea of suburban terror, like you can walk into your house, lock the door, and you're still not quite safe. There could be evil lurking around any corner. That's great. They really did nail that here, so I do want to give them a lot of credit for that as well. So yeah, I guess moral of the story, check it out if you find it interesting. Like I said, this is definitely a good one to like go see with a bunch of your friends, and let me know what you thought in the comments down below. I really would love to hear people who loved it. What did you love about it? What did you think of my comments? Do you think I'm off my gourd here? I've totally missed the mark. I don't know, man. It's not atrocious. There's a lot that works about it. There's a lot that certainly doesn't work, mostly in the story and plot department. It's just overhyped as shit is moral. That's moral of the story here. So thank you all very much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you enjoyed it even more than that. And of course, keep it crispy.